nothing, and nobody will ever hurt you again. The psychology of hidden pain. Have you ever looked perfectly fine on the outside while quietly falling apart inside? You answer every question with a calm smile. You show up, perform, keep going. But beneath it all, there's a tiredness even you don't know how to name. We live in a world that rewards strength and punishes softness. So you keep hiding the weight. Keep holding it together until one day, your soul begins to whisper, something isn't right. This video isn't about fixing you. It's about helping you see what you've been carrying and why that pain might be the beginning of something deeper. Not weakness, not failure, but an invitation to heal. So stay with this, because just maybe the very place you've been trying to escape is the place that leads you home. The hidden exhaustion behind a strong appearance. There are days when you smile skillfully, answer every question with calm, and walk past people as if you're doing just fine. But only you know that deep inside, a quiet fatigue has been building up. No one sees it. No one touches it, and you don't dare speak of it either. You brace yourself to be the kind one, the strong one, the one who can endure anything. You tell yourself, I can't be weak, I have to stay resilient. But sometimes, you can't help but wonder, who gives me permission to rest, who embraces the fragile part of me when even I refuse to face it. We grow up in a world that glorifies achievement, toughness, and emotional detachment. In that world, pain becomes a sign of weakness to be hidden. And over time, you learn to swallow it all, thinking everyone else is doing the same. But Jung once said, we are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become. And that choice begins with no longer running away from your feelings. The truth is, no one can hurt you more than the way you hurt yourself by pretending you're not hurting. You suppress, avoid, and pretend all to uphold an image of strength, but the truth isn't on the surface. It's in the way your eyes go quiet, in that distant gaze at night, in the moments you feel alone in a crowded room. Not everyone will notice, but you know, and maybe now it's time to stop hiding. You don't have to be okay all the time. You just have to be honest with yourself, because that's the true beginning of healing. And perhaps, inside the very exhaustion you've been burying, lies the doorway to the deepest peace you've been seeking. The real wound doesn't come from others. It comes from within. Have you ever thought your pain was caused by how others treated you? Because they were careless, betrayed you, criticized you, or walked away? It may sound valid, but if you're brave enough to look deeper, you'll see a more painful but more liberating truth. What hurts you is not them but you. More precisely, the parts of you that have never been healed. When someone says something that wounds you, it's not the words themselves, it's because they strike a wound you've carried for a long time. A fear of not being loved, a memory of abandonment, a belief that I'm not enough. So you're reacting to your past, not just the present. Carl Jung once said, we are not hurt by what happens to us, but by how we respond to it. And the way you respond is shaped by your unconscious, the place where all unhealed pain remains unnamed. The more you blame others, the more powerless you feel. But when you begin to turn inward and realize that pain is the voice of your neglected inner self, you begin to reclaim your power. The truth is, no one truly hurts you unless you were already hurting there before. Instead of asking, why did they do this to me? Try asking, why did this affect me so deeply? The answer won't be easy, but it will lead you to the door of emotional freedom. You'll no longer fear rejection or judgment because you'll know they do not define your worth. Pain is not the enemy. It is a signal. And when you listen to that signal from within, you don't just begin to heal. You become stronger than anyone who has ever hurt you. You cannot control the world, only how you respond to it. We grow up believing that if we're good enough, kind enough, and work hard enough, the world will be fair to us. But eventually, we learn sometimes the more you try, the harsher life becomes. That's when helplessness sets in. You feel like a small boat in a vast ocean, tossed by waves beyond your control. You can't choose who comes or goes, who loves or leaves, who stays or disappears. And fear creeps in. You fear being hurt. So you try to control everything, try to please others, avoid conflict, worry about things that haven't even happened yet. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control the outside, the more you lose control inside. The more you tense up to protect yourself from pain, the more vulnerable you become because you're fighting the impossible, controlling the world. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." You cannot change other people. You cannot stop the world from saying hurtful things. But you can change how you receive them, how you respond, how you speak to yourself. When someone rejects you, you can collapse, or you can stay still and ask yourself what just got triggered inside. Is it a fear of abandonment, a sense of inadequacy, an old memory left unhealed? True freedom doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from letting go of the need to control it. It's when you stop chasing what's beyond your reach and return to mastering your own mind. You cannot choose what happens to you, but you can always choose how you respond. And that choice is the beginning of inner strength. A strength not built on dominance, but on awareness, not on control, but on understanding. That's when you realize you don't need to master the world. You only need to master yourself. The place where destiny is decided is not outside. It's in your unconscious. We often think our fate is shaped by luck, circumstances, or how others treat us. But Carl Jung, the great psychologist, once said something that shook the world. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The unconscious, this is the dark realm within you. It holds unspoken wounds, rejected memories, suppressed emotions, fears, guilt, and pain that were never brought into light. And from that place, every decision, every reaction, every path you take quietly begins. You think you're choosing a relationship, a job, a lifestyle, but in truth, it is your wounded self, hidden in the unconscious, making those choices for you. It's your fear of abandonment that makes you cling to the wrong people. It's your unworthiness that causes you to reject good opportunities. It's your unhealed pain that makes you overreact to seemingly harmless words. And then you call it my personality, my fate, this is just who I am. But no, that is not destiny. That is your shadow, still unrecognized. Healing is not about running from pain. It's about turning inward to face the unconscious, the shadow you've been avoiding. Because within it lies not just the wounds, but the key to your freedom. When you begin to recognize your repeating patterns, when you're brave enough to ask, why do I keep choosing what hurts me? That is when you step into a new level of awareness. The place where fate is formed is not in someone else's hands. It is in the deepest part of you, the part you've never dared to face. And once you step into that place, once you illuminate it with awareness, you are no longer driven by the unconscious. You begin to live a life of your own choosing. True strength is not the absence of pain. It's the absence of fear of pain. Some people wear a cold, detached mask. They often say, I don't care anymore. Nothing can hurt me. But the truth is, inside they are still trembling, still bracing, still hiding a soul exhausted by too much endurance. Because strength is not about feeling nothing. Strength is feeling everything and not letting it destroy you. It's allowing yourself to hurt, but not losing yourself in that pain. Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You cannot truly access inner strength if you're still afraid of your own emotions, if you still avoid sadness, pain, anger, or loneliness, if you're still afraid of being seen as weak. The truth is, the more you try to hide your pain, the more fragile you become, because everything we reject finds its way back through outbursts, rage, depression, or an unexplained sense of imbalance. But when you dare to face your pain, when you accept it as a part of you, when you no longer fear others hurting you, because you've already embraced and healed those wounds, that's when you stop living on the defensive. That's when you start living in freedom. A deep freedom rooted in complete connection with your true self. True strength does not come from becoming cold. It comes from no longer fearing your feelings. Because you know you are strong enough to move through anything, not by bracing yourself, but by knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and standing firm even when the storm hits. No longer living to please, but to be true to yourself. There's a silent exhaustion that many carry, the fatigue of constantly becoming someone for others. The good child, the agreeable friend, the coworker, who never causes discomfort, the one who's always okay no matter what. We learn to smile when we want to cry, to stay silent when our heart wants to scream, to nod when our soul wants to say no. We live to be liked, to be accepted to the point we forget how to live truthfully. Carl Jung called this the rise of the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in. It helps us survive, but it also suffocates our true self. Because to keep the mask flawless, we sacrifice honesty with ourselves. You cannot heal if you continue living disconnected from your authentic self. Because the greatest pain doesn't come from what others do to you, but from what you keep doing to yourself every time you choose to please, rather than to be true. And then one day, your soul begins to resist. You feel numb, drained, aimless. You don't know who you are without the performance. But that is the turning point. That is the moment you get to choose. Will you continue living by others' expectations, or will you dare to peel off the layers and rediscover who you really are? Wholeness, as Jung said, does not come from being perfect, but from becoming integrated, from reconciling with the parts of yourself you've hidden, from rising through inner honesty. Living authentically isn't easy. It may disappoint some people, but it will bring you back to where you truly belong, to yourself, light whole. And finally, free. When pain becomes a calling from within, from a young age, we were taught to avoid pain. Crying is weakness. Suffering is failure. The fewer emotions, the better the self-control. And so we learn to hide, to grit our teeth and endure, to pretend we're okay, to whisper, I have to be strong, even as our heart quietly shatters. But Carl Jung saw pain through a different lens. He called it a messenger of the unconscious, the voice of the soul speaking when the mind becomes too loud to hear. Do you feel empty? It may not be because something is missing outside, but because a part of you within is crying out to be seen. Do you feel anger for no clear reason? It could be a cry for help repressed for years. Do you feel exhausted beyond explanation? Perhaps it's because the truest part of you, the part longing to live freely, to be loved without performing, is starving. Pain is not the enemy. It's a signal, a blinking light, telling you something inside is off course. And instead of turning away, Jung invites us to step closer, to sit down with our pain, pour it a cup of tea, and ask, what have you come to teach me? Right there at the point of greatest hurt, transformation can begin. Pain becomes a map leading you back to your roots. Each tear holds a piece of truth you've been afraid to face. So if you're hurting today, don't rush to push it away. Try listening. Perhaps this isn't the end. Perhaps it's the invitation to begin again, right from the place where you once broke. To be reborn, you must first enter the darkness. Each of us carries a shadow inside, a place where painful memories live, where rejected parts of our personality hide, where emotions once labeled unacceptable were buried. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the dark side of the psyche, the parts we suppress out of shame, fear, or fear of no longer being loved. And yet, paradoxically, it is that very part we try so hard to deny that holds the key to healing. Jung once said, one does not become whole by remaining in the light, but by facing the darkness. Rebirth doesn't start with light. It starts at the most painful place, with the courage to face the uncomfortable truths about ourselves: envy, anger, fear, unworthiness. The things we labeled as weak or ugly are in fact forgotten parts of ourselves, waiting to be seen and embraced. The shadow doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be understood, integrated into the whole of who we are. When we dare to enter our own darkness, not to judge, but to empathize, that darkness becomes no longer a threat, but a source of power. That's when fear turns into clarity. Anger turns into courage. Old wounds become the fuel for compassion and wisdom. To be truly reborn, you must pass through the wasteland of your own mind, the place where everything was once left behind. Not to get lost, but to rediscover your truest self, long forgotten. Only by walking through the dark does the light you seek begin to truly matter. True freedom begins when you remove the mask you've worn too long. We all wear a mask. Sometimes it's a cheerful smile hiding tears. Sometimes it's a calm demeanor covering inner chaos. And sometimes the mask has been there so long, we start to believe it is who we are. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the social face we wear to be accepted, to be loved, to appear normal. It helps us adapt, survive in a judgmental world. But it also leads us astray from ourselves. Have you ever felt exhausted from pretending? Ever looked in the mirror and wondered, who am I if I'm not constantly trying to please others? The mask may have started as a survival tool, but if you're not careful, it becomes a prison for the soul. Freedom doesn't come from controlling what others think of you. It comes from having the courage to be honest with yourself, to say I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm imperfect without shame, to live without constantly needing to prove anything. And here's the miracle: when you take off the mask, others will see something they never could before, the real you, not polished but sincere, not perfect but deep. And that kind of truth is what connects us to each other in the most profound way. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's being who you really are without performing. And to have that, you must be willing to remove the mask that has hidden your essence for far too long. Awakening is a lonely journey, but sacred and necessary awakening doesn't begin with a loud bell. It often starts in a long silence, a moment where everything around you seems to lose meaning, where relationships, roles, and old dreams no longer fit. That's when the soul begins to whisper, it's time to return home. But this journey is not loud. It doesn't come with blinding light or external recognition. On the contrary, it often begins with a deep sense of loneliness. Because when you start to change, everything around you, people, habits, even your goals will no longer resonate the same way. You'll be misunderstood. Some people will leave. There will be moments of self-doubt. But these are not signs that you've lost your way. They're proof that you've left your comfort zone and are moving toward your true light. Carl Jung once said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." Awakening is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to yourself, not led by wounds, fears, or patterns of avoidance. And though lonely, it is sacred. Because at the end of that road, you don't just find peace. You find your soul again intact, authentic, and more whole than ever. No one can walk that path for you. But once you do, you will never live the same way again. A soul that sees clearly can no longer be hurt. When we live unconsciously, we are easily thrown off by words, glances, rejections, even silent pauses. But when the soul has been lit from within, when your shadows are seen and accepted, the outside world loses its power over you. That doesn't mean you no longer feel. You still experience emotions, but you're no longer consumed by them. You can still be hurt, but the pain no longer defines you. You become the observer of your own self, seeing clearly when fear arises, when insecurity surfaces, but you don't run. You face it calmly, like someone who finally understands. Carl Jung said, "We are not saved by denying the darkness, but by accepting it." When you stop fighting yourself, when you stop chasing others' expectations, and start listening to your inner voice, you reach a state where nothing outside can truly shake you. Clarity is not perfection. It is a centered stillness within. From that place, you no longer need to be right. You no longer need to be liked. You no longer need to win. You only need to be yourself, whole and enough. And that is what makes you unshakable. Not because the world has changed, but because you've changed the way you exist in it. A soul that has awakened no longer hopes for a gentler world. It has the strength to walk through the storm, unshaken. The end is not the end, but the beginning of true healing. You may have passed through the deepest layers of pain, faced the old wounds you tried to forget. You've taken off the mask of strength, dared to look into your own darkness, and discovered you are still alive. And deep inside, there's something real, fragile, yet full of potential. The ending you once feared turns out to be the end of an outdated version of you. The death of illusions, the fall of beliefs like I must be perfect to be loved, or I'll be abandoned if I show who I truly am. And when those collapse, you finally have a chance to rebuild, not from defense, but from honesty. Carl Jung said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Healing is not about avoiding suffering, it's walking through it with courage and discovering that on the other side, there is not an end, but a new beginning, deeper, stronger. You are no longer the person you were. But you don't have to become someone else either. You only need to keep walking with a new light in your heart, with a clearer knowing of who you are, with a soul no longer chained to tired expectations. This is where you begin again, not from zero, but from the place inside you that has learned how to love, how to accept, and how to live a life that finally means something. And this journey is just beginning. Transforming pain into light and living a truly meaningful life. Everything you've been through, the wounds, the loneliness, the breaking, was never meant to defeat you. They came as strict teachers to teach you what no book ever could, how to understand yourself. When you dare to walk through the darkness, to face your fear, to look at the less than perfect parts of yourself, something strange begins to happen. You start seeing life differently. You stop needing to please others. You stop needing to prove your worth. And you simply live truthfully. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole, a journey that doesn't lead you to some external destination, but brings you closer to the depths of your true being. And it is there where you finally find meaning. Because meaning doesn't come from achievements. It doesn't come from praise. Meaning is born when you use the pain you've lived to connect with others. When you turn your personal experience into light that can guide someone who's still lost. You don't need to be a healer. You just need to live authentically, awake, present, as someone who has come home to themselves. And that alone makes you a light in someone's darkness. At that point, pain is no longer a burden. It becomes a foundation. And from that foundation, you build a life not perfect, but deep, real, and full of humanity. Healing doesn't end in peace. It continues in every mindful choice. In every moment, you choose love over defense, understanding over judgment, life over mere survival. And if you're walking this path, remember, you are not alone. Because anyone who dares face their darkness is helping light up this world, starting with their own heart.